for this virtual Beth Emet in Earth Day. Earth Day celebrated this year its 50th anniversary. And while we can't be together in person, we can be here this way and certainly educate ourselves. And another just commercial, if you've done something this week on the 22nd and you want to share a photo, please send that to me or to Becky Kaplan. We'll collect them and we'll share it with the congregation. My favorite text from Jewish tradition on the environment comes from Ecclesiastes Rabbah from the Mishnah, and it says, when God created the first human being, God took him and showed him all the trees of the Garden of Eden. And he said to him, see my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. And everything I created it for you, for human beings. And then God says to the human being, be careful not to spoil or destroy my world. For if you do, there will be nobody after you to repair it. Those words might sound familiar to you, that I shared them when we were having our Paris to Pittsburgh movie, but it certainly is worth repeating. And it's interesting that in this midrash, it's trees that God shows to the first human being. We learn in the Torah, in Deuteronomy, that if one sieges a city, so you're at war and you take over a city, you are not allowed to cut down the trees unless you know that that tree does not bear fruit. And this injunction in the Torah embraces a value in Judaism which we call Bal Tashchit. Bal Tashchit is a value not to waste. Cutting down a fruit tree wastes the food of that tree that it could have produced as long as it was standing. Today, in our more modern and hopefully more peaceful society, we express the value of Bal Tashchit, not wasting, in other ways, such as not taking more food on our plate than we can eat, or not, and this is a pet peeve of mine, not using food for an art project when that food could have gone to somebody and fed them. We can also demonstrate Bal Tashchit in the ways we accumulate our garbage and fill the land. We can fulfill Bal Tashchit when it comes to our human-made materials by reducing or reusing or recycling. And we can fulfill the value of Bal Tashchit when it comes to natural materials, i.e. food, by composting, which we'll learn about in just a few moments. There's a saying in our Jewish tradition that comes from Pirkei Avot, the ethics of literally our fathers, or the ethics of our ancestors, when first century Rabbi Ben Bagbag said, turn it and turn it, for everything is in it. Now, Rabbi Ben Bagbag was referring to Torah, teaching that the entire universe is contained within the Torah, and we learn from it by reading it over and over again, turning it and turning it again. Well, his words can also apply to us in teaching the value of Bal Tashchit when it comes to composting. We turn it and turn it again, the compost pile, that is, and everything is in it. Everything that we need to spread across our growing things, and in turn, it will give nutrients to the soil that in turn will help plants to grow. The values of Judaism teach us to take care of the earth and not to waste. And we're here today to learn more about turning it and turning it via composting. And in order to do so, it's my pleasure to introduce Sharon Smaller, a member of Temple Judea Mitzvah since her daughters were little, and now she's an empty nester, except I believe one of her daughters is home. She served on various roles at the synagogue as our board officer, specifically secretary, and she and her husband Joel Freeman live in Evanston. She first got involved with environmental issues when she helped found a school garden at her daughter's elementary school back in 2008, and has been very involved with edible gardens. Sharon chaired this event and worked hard with Michelle Oxman and Lily Aaron and Eli Kustin, who planned so far in advance and put in a lot of effort that we were prepared with all these various people to do this program with lots of people in person. But thank you, Sharon, and everyone you worked with for your great determination, holding this program today, rethinking it, scaling it back, and making this virtual experience possible. So I turn it now over to you, Sharon. Thank you.
We were going to take a pretty wide lens look at climate change originally, but obviously because of COVID-19, we've had to reboot, and we decided to take kind of a close look at composting. And you might ask, why composting now? And I think because we're all sort of tied to home, we're all generating food waste. And it's a significant issue because there's an estimate that 30 to 40% of our food supply is wasted. And it's the biggest component of landfill space. And I think the average family wastes approximately $1,600 a year on food waste. So I think by redirecting that food waste, obviously we want to generate less food waste, but the food waste that we do, if we can redirect it and out of landfills, that will be a really good thing. So that's the first thing. I want everybody, if they can take a look at some of those links, that would be, they're useful resources, not just for Earth Day and Earth Day week, but throughout the year. And I'd like to introduce Mary Beth Shea. Mary Beth has been with Collective Resource Compost now for 9 years. In fact, she was their second employee. And Mary Beth is also a climate reality leader, the group founded by Al Gore. And she says that she tries to tie this into almost everything she does at Collective Resource Compost. And then we'll save our questions for the very end. So Mary Beth will be the first part of our program, and then the second part will be Eli and JR talking about composting at Beth Emet. So I'll turn it over to you, Mary Beth.
Thanks, Sharon. So Sharon and I know each other because we met when we were both setting up gardens at our daughter's schools. I was at Dewey and Sharon was at Kingsley. And so that's our connection. It was called, we met at this great group called Schools Are Gardening in Evanston. It was called SAGE, and that was really helpful at the time. I have a soft spot for Beth Emet because my daughters went through the early childhood program, so I was very excited to be a part of this event, whether in person or in Zoom. I actually even chaired a couple of Barnes & Noble fundraisers back then, if anybody remembers going to those. So I'm not going to pretend like I don't have notes. So if you see me look away, it's not because I'm distracted. It's because I'm trying to tell you everything that I want to tell you. So we're going to talk today about the sexy topic of composting. But first, we're going to pull back and talk about the sexy topic of climate change. Why? Because they're connected. So this month's Earth Day theme was climate action. And diverting your food scraps through composting is a terrific climate action to take. So what's wrong with sending food scraps to landfills? Landfills are not the right environment for them. They are covered in plastic, they fester, and they create methane, which is a greenhouse gas that is 85 times more potent than CO2. So we're realizing that this thing that we've been doing our whole lives has been contributing to global warming. In fact, landfills are one of the top 10 emitters of greenhouse gases. So what's right about sending food scraps to commercial composting facilities or composting them in your backyard? So the food scraps are given the right environment to biodegrade, and this precious resource can be added back to our soil, so we can continue to grow plants and our food on our planet. So if we were holding this, holding the in-person fair, and you came up to my table, I'd ask you a series of questions so that I could lay out your composting options for you. So that's what I'm going to do now. So the first thing I would ask is, what city do you live in? And I'm guessing most people would say Evanston. And I'd say, great, we have a a franchise agreement with the city of Evanston that makes it less expensive for you to use our service. But let's back up and see, tell me what kind of building you live in. So that could be a house or a multi-unit building like a condo, a co-op, or an apartment. So if you answered house, then I would say, okay, you have a few options. So you could compost some of your food scraps in your backyard. And the reason that, so some is the most important word in that sentence, because there's only certain things I would recommend that you put in your backyard bin, because it's a small bin. So you would put things like food scraps, so, vegetable or fruit, coffee grounds, eggshells, and any kind of plant matter that you had. But that's kind of about it. And then there are tons of resources on the internet to help you get started with how to do a backyard bin. And if there's a follow-up email, I'm happy to give you some resources on how to do that. So the next question I would ask you, if you lived in a house in Evanston, is do you have a yard cart that you put your yard waste in? Like, did you purchase a yard cart from the city and pay an annual fee to have it empty? And if you said yes, I'd say, did you know that you can put food scraps in there during the pickup season, which is 8 months out of the year from April to November? And if you said yes, I knew that, then I'd ask you if you were adding food scraps to it. And if you said no, then I would encourage you to do it. And I would also, if this was something that you were interested in doing, I would kind of lay out the differences between doing it that way and using our container swap program. So one of the advantages to using that yard cart is price. Although it only really makes sense if you're also putting yard waste in it. So the cart costs $82.50 plus $25 for an annual pickup free. There's no additional fee for adding your food scraps, but if you don't already have a yard cart, there's a little bit of an initial kind of like setup fee. So that's the advantage, is price. The disadvantage is that you have to keep it clean yourselves. And food scraps are a little yuckier than yard waste. But then I tell you that if you wanted to do it successfully, you would, especially in the heat of summer, and especially if you weren't putting much yard waste in there, the way to keep it clean is to actually freeze your food scraps, and the day of pickup, put them in a paper bag and put it right in the middle, like on the day of pickup, put it right in the middle of the bin. And then the bin will stay clean and you won't have any problems. Let's see, where was I? Okay, so, but you may remember that I said that's 8 months out of the year. And if you're separate, you get into this habit, if you've been doing it for 8 months, separating out your food scraps, it's kind of heartbreaking when the season ends and you have to put your food scraps in the trash. So we developed at Collective Resource Compost, we developed what we call the Winter Gap Program. So you could use our container swap program in those months that the yard cart is not happening. But I have to tell you that most people do our Winter Gap program, and then they don't want to go back to using the yard cart. They like our way better. So now I'm going to tell you more specifically about our container swap service, because it applies to everyone, no matter what kind of building you're living in. So I have not forgotten about the multi-unit building households. In fact, the founder and owner of Collective Resource Compost, my friend Arlene Howard, created this service because she lived in a condo and she had no way to compost. So if you live in Evanston or Skokie, we have the same franchise agreement with both cities now. And we also service a lot of Chicago neighborhoods and a lot of suburbs. We have, if you live in a different city than Evanston or Skokie, at the end when we're taking Q&A, you can ask me if we service your town at this time. So let's see, where was I? Okay, and then we also have a service area map on our website. So we have two kinds of containers. I was gonna bring a bucket, but I forgot to bring a bucket. So, but I think a lot of people are familiar with like Home Depot buckets, which are orange and have a snap-on lid. We have, that's the size bucket. And we used to use Home Depot buckets, but now we have our own buckets, but it's the same sort of deal. And then then we have something that looks like this. I love this. This is like a Barbie version of our 32-gallon cars. That's what that one looks like, only it's bigger. And when we use these, they actually get bagged, so lined with a liner. And so generally households use the 5-gallon buckets, and institutions, businesses and institutions like Beth Emet use 32-gallon totes. And you put all your food scraps in the container and then you put it out for pickup. That's all you have to do. And we swap it out for a washed out container. So that's different from the yard cart because you have to keep your yard cart clean. And then there's more that you can put in it than you could put in your backyard bin. So you can put meat and dairy and pizza boxes. So if you're using our 5-gallon buckets and you have a pizza box, we just ask you to put it, on top of the bucket for pickup. So what we do for you is we wash it out, and we take way more things, and then we send you a reminder when it's your pickup time. And with that, you get a link to my monthly blog post, which is really exciting. So speaking of exciting, I wanted to tell you about something new that we're offering. And when I say new, we actually haven't quite launched it. I don't know if you guys are as aware of this as I am, but International Compost Awareness Week is coming up. Yay! It's May 3rd through 9th. So we decided that, I don't know, so that holiday kind of, if you can call it that, that Awareness Week comes on the, rides the coattails of Earth Day. And it happens every year. And so we are rolling out something we're calling neighbor totes. And that is using the 32-gallon totes like this. So what we realized that our model doesn't work super great for people who live alone. Because if you live alone, okay, so what we always say is, so like if you're a 2-person household, you usually fill your bucket like once every 2 weeks. We call that a bi-weekly pickup. If there's 4 or 5 people in your household, that's usually a weekly pickup. But if there's 1 person in your household, that's like a pickup every 4 weeks. And it's a little hard to manage. We have customers who do it, but it's a little hard to manage because after 4 weeks, it gets a little gnarly in your bucket, I have to say. So we came up with this idea to encourage people to be able to do it communally. And that can happen in a lot of different ways. Like, it's a little unfortunate that we're in the middle of this COVID crisis, because this is something we really wanted to roll out with faith communities, because faith communities, often people are going to their faith community once a week, and that would be a good time to be able to drop off your composting, or maybe, it's not just for services that people go to faith communities. They might be involved in committees, and it's also a way that faith communities can help pay for composting at their building by doing it communally and charging the people who are using it, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's see, where was I? So if this was something that was like you were doing with your neighbors, so 1 person would host it and would kind of take care of like the whole money piece of it too. So this actually happens already a lot in condo buildings and co-op buildings. My boyfriend lives in a 18-unit co-op building, and we rolled out the program with just one tote in one of the towers, like in the basement, which is like where everybody has their laundry, also really easy to access and is also accessible to everyone in the building from the inside. And then it got popular enough that we've rolled it out to another, like two of the three towers. So let's see, where was I? Okay, so you don't actually have to be neighbors to share one. You could be a Havara, or you could be a friend group. And if you don't know your neighbors, it's actually a great way to get to know them. I mean, again, during this COVID crisis, it's a little, you know, you're not going to want to go knock on your neighbor's doors necessarily. But once we're past the worst of this, it could be a great conversation starter. So that's enough about composting, the specifics of those composting services. I wanted to talk about the Climate Action and Resilience Plan. So we're really grateful to the city for creating this plan, Climate Action and Resilience Plan, what's known as CARP. And here's a fun fact. Sharon's husband, Joel Freeman, was one of the chairs of the committee that spent a year creating it. And another fun fact is that pages 15 and 16, I actually did have that part memorized. Pages 15 and 16 are on Evanston's zero waste goals and initiatives. And this can be a helpful tool when you're trying to convince others to start a composting program. The city is asking for all of our help in getting to zero waste by 2050, if not sooner. So again, my boyfriend, when they had their monthly meeting of his co-op, he brought copies of pages 15 and 16 as sort of a support of why this was a good idea to do this program. And so one of the great things about diverting your food scraps, so you know that it's something that you can personally do to mitigate climate change. But one of the cool things that happens is when you begin paying attention to your food waste, is that you begin to waste less food. And so Sharon was talking about this earlier, that people spend a lot of money on wasted food. And composting can help you to stop doing that. So if you become aware of what you're wasting, it's our hope that you will buy less or buy differently. And the sustainable behavior of composting leads to other behaviors like reducing single-use plastic or eating less meat. So I started making my own vegetable broth with the ends of onion, celery, carrots that would ordinarily go straight into the compost bin. And I guarantee I wouldn't have even thought of that if I wasn't composting already. And it's so easy, and it reduces what I put in my recycling bin now, which makes me very happy. Our next frontier, our next personal household frontier, is to make our own hummus. Not to be confused with humus. That's a little composting humor for you. Sharon got it. Let's see. Okay, so there are a couple of other ways to compost that fall into a category I call fringe composting, in that you have to have a special personality to do them. So bokashi is one of them. It uses enzymes, and vermicomposting is another one, which uses worms. And again, I'll add some links that will help you find those, because maybe they are the right composting method for you. That's so if you ever do read my blog, in the bio, it says something I strongly believe, and that's it's better to do something rather than nothing. So I encourage you to find out what the something is you can do right now and take climate action. My boss, Erlene, had the idea if she made composting easy, more people would do it. And she was right. So thank you for having me here today, and I'm happy to answer questions in the Q&A.
Well, thank you, Mary Beth. I think you made the subject of composting more entertaining than I thought it could be. So congratulations. And I will just quickly shamelessly endorse collective resource compost, because I think Erlene actually did accomplish that. We've been composting now through Collective Resource for 2 years. We've had very few family fights about taking out the pail on the counter into the bucket. A few, but nothing major. And it's really been relatively routine. And I think it has sensitized me to like not overbuying at the farmer's market, not overbuying at the grocery store, not totally, but more than I had. So I'm really appreciative of that. Okay, so we're going to move on to the second part, which is about Beth Emet launching a composting program. And it's really through the effort and passions of two people. One is a young person, Eli Kustin. And he's actually a neighbor, which I did not discover until we started working together in this committee. And he's only in 7th grade, and I'm just really amazed at his energy and his vision, and really just proud of him. And he is working hand in hand with J.R. Zumalt, who is the head gardener of all things vegetables. And Beth Emet has just been very involved with sustainability and food. He's also been a 6th grade teacher in the Beit Sefer and has had his 2 daughters bar mitzvahed at the temple. So they're going to just talk about how they launched the program and kind of the vision that they have for composting at Beth Emet.
Thank you, Sharon. Oh.
You're welcome.
Okay. So is it working? Okay. So I'd like to spend just can you hear me? Hello? Yep. Okay.
Your volume is a little low. If you could speak louder or increase it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Sharon. So I'd like to spend just 1 or 2 minutes giving just a brief overview on what we've accomplished to date and our plans for the future of composting at Beth Emet. So we've started composting at Soup Kitchen only for the preparation, so only in the kitchen actually. But we are working on expanding that to the plates, the silverware, and the guest food waste, and to Beit Sefer, so Beit Sefer snacks, clementines, orange peels, all that good stuff, preschool lunches, and staff food waste from their lunches. So the eventual goal is that all food waste is composted in all aspects of the synagogue. So at every event, oneg, kahal, so any event that happens at Beth Emet, we compost all the food waste. And we would like to thank the city of Evanston for being so supportive, for giving us the CARP mini grant, Climate Action Resilience Plan, to help us get started with this. And we'd like to thank everybody at Beth Emet who's helped support this effort. Now I'm going to turn it over to JR, who's going to encourage everybody to work or to start composting.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Let's see. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah, so as Eli said, I'm here basically to encourage you to begin composting. Mary Beth did a great job explaining how simple it could be, and kudos to the city of Evanston and Skokie for partnering with Collective Resource and for their efforts in this realm. The idea of composting is I think it's pretty foreign to most people, and it's becoming much less so. And so events like this are helpful in uncovering that, as well as showing that how easy it can be. Some expected and unexpected benefits of composting. Some of these we've mentioned. Primary one is we're taking what's often considered garbage and turning it into something that's very useful. And a second is changing the impact on landfills. One estimate is that landfills will be filled by 2036. That's pretty soon. What we're going to do after that, I don't really know. So slowing that down is a great goal. The secondary fact of the organic matter going into landfills creating methane, as Mary Beth mentioned as well, is a big problem with climate change. It's, she said 85 times more potent than carbon dioxide. That's a pretty staggering figure. And so if you anaerobically digest the organic matter, you're going to get methane. If you do compost, you're going to get CO2. That the other thing that was mentioned about how much food we throw away, very valid points, and other reasons to embrace composting. Some say 40% of what we throw. That would be 36 million tons a year, approximately. I figured that out. It comes to about 9 tons per person in the US. So a lot of that is through distribution, through waste at stores, that sort of thing. But I also want to talk just a little bit about the benefit of the material. Compost improves soil structure as well as the soil's ability to bind heavy metals. So if you're gardening, if you increase organic matter, if you compost, you're going to actually create healthier vegetables because those heavy metals are going to be bound up in the soil as opposed to going in the plant if it's less healthy soil. Another benefit is that by having a healthier, robust soil, it actually pulls CO2 from the atmosphere, either through plants, through the particularly fungi take a lot of CO2, and even the soil itself, all the microorganisms are pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere. If you compost well, it rots very quickly. It greatly speeds the decomposition process. Also, heat can be produced, so it makes the soil, the compost better for the garden, can kill weed seeds, other problems. And finally, just the fact that the plants thrive suppresses plant diseases. It also reduces the need for fertilizers and pesticides because you're feeding them. So I want to just do a real brief overview of types of ways of composting that we've mentioned some of them. The old school way is piles. It's usually done with 3 piles in your backyard so that you can kind of have different levels. And then there's forks or scoops and you're manually turning it. There's also things you can twist down into it and pull it back like a screw, and that'll aerate the pile, which makes it much easier to aerate. But more popular and simpler is a tumbler, but that's an additional expense, but it also makes it a lot easier to do. And it very importantly protects it protects the compost from vermin, from rats, possums, skunks. I find, especially when the skunks are all coming out in the fall, they'll come and want to dig into a normal compost pile. So you need to cover it up if you don't want to be invaded by the skunks. So that's the other. So the piles, the tumblers, and then there's services. So using a service makes it much simpler, whether it be the city, as she mentioned, or using collective resource. Then it's very, very simple to do. I feel like there's a sort of a stigma against composting. People fear that it's going to create smells, maybe draw bugs, that kind of thing. Whereas in reality, if you take care of your bin, you clean it, your can in you dump it regularly, food's going to rot whether you throw it in the bin or in the waste bin, or if you put it in here. So if you're handling it, you actually could have a less smelly house, so to speak. You're not going to have food rotting in your house because you're throwing it away in a proper way. So really the underlying push that I want to put for composting and partly why we're bringing it to Beth Emet is to expand it in our community as well as within Beth Emet itself, to show a goal of wanting to work with nature, a goal of reducing waste, but also of turning what could be waste into a valuable resource. In a community such as Beth Emet, filled with children, it provides an opportunity to show real effort in making such changes, in showing that we care about the earth and we care about growing things. Learning to grow things is great for kids. It should be a valuable part of our educational program. Composting is a way to grow or create soil. It also, by growing earthworms, bacteria, fungi, things that kind of gross people out somewhat are great for composting. That's what turns it over. But then that product produces something you could grow plants with. And the plants are gonna thrive if they're given compost, particularly vermicomposting, as Mary Beth mentioned briefly, of using worms. If you're engaged at that level where you want to do composting with worms, and you can set it up, and it's relatively simple, but it needs more supervision and taking care of. But the product is amazing. It's like the compost can be readily absorbed by plants. It's like instant plant food, a very, very high quality plant food. So one other thing I want to this is sort of my thing is larger scale agriculture. Our current large scale agricultural system is based on poisoning all but the monocrop, particularly with Roundup and the GMOs of corn and soybeans. And by putting all these chemicals, having seen farming throughout my lifetime for 50 years, the soil is degrading. And so we need to be building soil and putting it back into our food through composting, as opposed to destroying the soil with the chemicals and really causing a degradation of the environmental system in the large scale. So that's a little off base for this particular, a little digression, but nonetheless something I'm passionate about, and I think something that composting is critical for as well. Getting this stuff back out into growing plants. But the main point I want to make, it's important to recognize we can be the agents of change, and when opportunities arise, we must take initiative. Getting organic matter out of the waste stream can and must be done, and you can do it with just a little bit of effort, a little bit of expense. We can all be part of this. And so in closing, step up. Thank you, and thanks to the Environmental and Climate Action Committee. That's it.
Rabbi, did you want to lead the Q&A if there's any questions?
I can call on people if you want.
Okay. All
Sure.
right.
Yeah, Eli, you can go ahead. And Eli, I'll help you, or you can also unmute people as
Okay,
they
yeah.
have questions.
So just raise your hand either like this, or if you want to do it the tech savvy way, you can do it under participants. And just so you know, we are being recorded, so it might say your name. So if you don't like that, you should probably change your name, I guess. So. Okay. Paula K. You're muted. Let me unmute you here. There we go. I unmuted you.
Okay, thank you. It's nice to see you, Eli, so involved in this, as I've watched you grow up. So I have two questions. One is, does the collective resource compost program come into Wilmette?
Yes. We've been working in Wilmette for at least 7 or 8 years, households.
So then then if someone like me who is new to this decides they want to do this, I could contact the program?
Right, so we're gonna send a I'm guessing we'll send a follow-up email. Can we do that, Sharon, to the
Yeah,
participants?
I think so.
And there'll be tons of links in there. And basically you go on our website and there's a form you fill out where you put all of your information, your address, all of that stuff. If you know how often you want it picked up, you put that in there and then we get you going.
Okay, and that's the same with the share. I mean the program. I mean it's like
The neighbor totes, you mean?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a box to check. You can check more than one box, actually. If you want information about just doing it in your household, but if you also want information on the neighbor totes thing.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mark Blumenthal.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Mary Beth, I have a question. We have a large compost bin in the backyard. We visit about once a week. And I'm wondering, can you put things like cork in there that come out of wine bottles? Because if it comes from a cork tree, obviously, then it was plant-based.
Well, do you mean in your backyard bin? Can you put it in your backyard bin? Is that what you're asking me?
That's my question.
You can, because it is natural. It's sort of like corn cobs. And, I would break it up as much as possible, make it as small as possible, because it's pretty hard and it might take a while, but it could be a nice science experiment to figure out when you're putting it in and then compost it that way. There are cork collections at, you can't do it now, can't do anything now. But at some local wine places, they collect corks for other purposes, but yes, if it's not the plastic ones, but yes, the natural cork ones.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mark Schoenfield. Were you raising your hand? You're muted here.
Muted.
Yep, there.
Okay. Mary Beth, we've been using the Wilmette compost program. It's now, at least in its second year, where you just put it out in the bin in a yard bag and you put a sticker on for $1 a week during the 8-month period. So other than the gap period, is there any reason to switch?
So that program doesn't accept as many things as our program does, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I was a little disappointed actually when I heard what Wilmette's program was taking, because it's pretty much what you can put in your backyard bin, right? It's not taking meat
Right.
and dairy. What about pizza boxes? Could you put pizza boxes in there? Is it taking any kind of soiled paper?
You can put shredded paper in.
Okay. But so, I think it's a fine program. It works great for people who that's what they can afford. But I feel like it's best to divert. It's better for the planet to divert all of your food scraps. And so if you eat meat and if you have, it depends on how much you have, So, and maybe there are other people like in your neighborhood who are using that Wilmette program and would want to, get a bucket, do a bucket communally just for the stuff that you can't put in the bin. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's super great. Let me begin. I didn't begin this way. I think it's super great that you're using that program. But there is more you could be diverting.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Let's see. Morton Dem. Oh, wait, you were raised. Yep, you.
We've been composting, backyard composting for years. Years ago, we had open composting bin things, but then the city got crazy about the rats, but even though we didn't really see any rats, so they made us buy these. We had to switch to closed compost things with a lid and sides and air holes and all that. and it's just so difficult to use them. You have to get the stuff out of the bottom, and it's really cumbersome and difficult. And actually last year, we had tiny ants in the compost when we went to open it and dig it, and it was horrible to deal with. Does anyone know why I would have had tiny ants in my compost? I don't know. If anybody can help me with that one. But it's just become so cumbersome. The open composting is so much easier to handle and deal with and use. And now we're doing some open composting in the back, way back of the yard, just leaves and no food items. But
So are you in Evanston or Skokie?
in Evanston.
You are in Evanston. Are you like close to the lake or something?
Well, several blocks, yeah.
So you're in a neighborhood that was having a rat problem.
Well, they thought they put one of those black boxes in the alley somewhere and all that, but then they took it away after a while. So I don't really think we had a rat problem, but you know, at that point they made us switch. I think later they changed, you know, the things changed, but we had already switched to these closed ones. So anyway, I just find them so difficult, and then the ants.
That's such a bummer because you want it to be easy, right? Because it's easier to do it if it's easy, right?
Right. Has anyone heard of it?
I love that you're doing it in your yard. I love that you're doing it in your yard, and that you've probably diverted so much because you've been doing it for years.
We have done it year round, but you know, not in our compost. We just do the fruits and vegetables. But now with the green can, we do the other stuff for the 8 months. And then certainly I want that compost. I mean, like using your whatever it's called, community, what's it called? Your
Neighbor or container swap. That's what I think.
Okay. So what happens to the compost that you guys make?
So we haul it to a commercial composting facility. Oh, I'm looking at you, but I should look at you. And we haul it to a commercial composting facility that is in Chicago, and it's generally not part of our model to give back compost. But this year we're trying this thing with another small business like ours called Healthy Soil Compost. We're making it available for people to come pick up compost. So people are saying like they're one of our customers, and you know, and we're paying for it, basically is what happens. But I mean, it has not historically been part of our model because a lot of our customers don't need compost. You know, they don't have yards, you know, that's why they're using us. They're businesses, they don't have yards, you know, they don't need compost. But we do realize that like we want to be part of people using this food scrap amended compost that they help to create, you know, so we're working it out. But we like to use our time educating, you know, instead of, you know, kind of delivering compost. So we'll see how this year goes. This is the first year that we've done this pickup thing.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
One thing I could offer in suggestion for the open compost pile is what I do is I have just like chicken wire, you know, like the little circle things. And then if you have like a couple of 2x4s, some rocks, you can just like cover it, and then things can't get at it. And it's very simple. You know, it's a little bit of an effort to pull it on and off, but you can make it so it can just like fold back, and then you just kind of lay it back on. It's not the most aesthetic method, but it works well, and it allows you to just do like normal composting now.
What have you heard of the ant problem?
I think that, you know, it's a bad, anything like that is from not turning it a lot, you know. Yeah, they make these things that are really cool, or you can make it yourself that are kind of like a spiral, and you screw it in there, and then you just yank it back out, and it just kind of turns, it just like creates a hole through it, which it'll really speed the decomposition, and it's much easier than like trying to turn it off. Pardon?
It's like an auger, right?
Yeah, kind of like exactly, like an auger with a handle on the top.
you put it in straight and then it goes like this.
Yeah, there's that kind also.
Yeah,
There's like a screw one, or there's like the wing one, and
Yeah.
either of them work pretty well.
I mean, the other problem is with the covered ones is they don't get rain.
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah, you have to water it or something. Yeah.
So the covered is just a real problem, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the big tumblers, they make these big tumblers that are really slick now, but they're expensive, and
They're too small.
yeah, exactly. And they're too small. And yeah, the big ones are, and then also the idea of you need 2 or 3 if you're really going to crank it, so that you can't be putting the new stuff in with the old. But yeah, there's lots of options, but
So I will look for one of those things online somewhere then.
the Turner thing. Yeah. I could send you a link to, like, there's various ways that you can make them out of other things too that aren't very difficult.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
JR, maybe you could add that to the links that I'm going to send.
Okay.
Okay, next. Who's anybody? Okay, Sharon.
So Eli, I've just been curious what your primary impetus was to start this program. Like, what really gave you the notion?
That's a tough question. I'm not 100% sure. I'm just trying to think about when I originally started. I don't know. That's
It just kind of developed over time.
I'm going to ask Eli a follow-up question. I know that you're becoming a bar mitzvah, which is very soon, and an early mazel tov to you, that this was part of your mitzvah project that you were doing with the Gemilut Chassidim, that you were doing for the process of becoming bar mitzvah. Has the idea of composting and climate change action been a part of your life prior to that?
well, I mean, this wasn't just my bar mitzvah project. I mean, I've been working on getting it done at my school since 6th grade, so last year. So, I mean, it's not just my bar mitzvah project. And I mean, I still plan to keep working on it after my bar mitzvah project too, if that answers your question. And anyone else? If not, I actually have do you have one, Jesse? Jesse, do you have a question?
No, I think I'm gonna, if there aren't any other questions, I'm gonna.
Eli has one.
So, I mean, I struggle to see, like, we actually just ordered the yard waste bin this week, just for food scraps. I mean, it does seem like, I do have the list pulled up here, but it does seem like, at least in Evanston, they do accept a lot of the stuff that Collective Resources does in terms of meat. And I mean, it seems to me that is probably the easiest thing to do, like, just because it's a lot cheaper, and you can also compost more without having to pay extra, whereas with Collective Resources, I know you'd have to pay an extra fee, if I'm correct, for another bucket. So is the yard waste that's taken to a commercial composting facility similar to Collective Resources, correct?
Yeah, so it's a program that, like ours, only Groot is the company that's hauling it. Mm-hmm. And so what you're talking about is called a yard waste tag along. And it's kind of, I just wanted to sort of educate you on the whole thing. It's kind of low hanging fruit for municipalities to have these sorts of yard waste tag alongs, because they have the infrastructure for it. A lot of homes, single family homes, and I'm really emphasizing that, have yard waste bins and use them. So this was a way for them to add composting to their what they're offering, like an easy way to do it. So yes, if you live in a single family home, I would do that. That would be the best solution. That would be probably, it's the least expensive way for you to do that. But a lot of people do not live in single family homes. And that's the great part about our business, is that we can do all the rest.
Right.
So
Yeah, that
that's
makes a
your
lot of
question.
sense. Yeah.
That's your question, but I wanted to teach you other stuff too.
No, yeah, that was helpful. Yeah, that makes sense that that it's only in single family homes. I remember that we did reach out to the city to see if we could do that for Beth Emet because of the cost savings, and they don't do that, which makes sense too.
Oh, well, I want to tell you one more thing, and that is that the franchise agreement with Evanston and Skokie makes it cheaper for businesses and everybody else to compost too. So our tote program is less expensive than if you were to use it in Chicago or Wilmette. So one thing that I would encourage everybody to do is for the restaurants or businesses that you have any, affiliation with, to also encourage them to compost, to be a leader wherever you are. And I thought it was interesting, Eli, you were kind of like, I don't know, when did I think of this? I don't know. So people will be like, so Mary Beth, when did you become an environmentalist? I'm kind of like, I can't really mark the day. It's just kind of like a growing awareness that we kind of all need to be environmentalists. Mm-hmm. So I understand that you're kind of like, I don't know. I also wanted to, I could talk about this stuff forever, but I wanted to thank the rabbi for her words at the beginning, which I'm super happy that you're recording because I want to listen to them again. But one of the things that you were talking about, this motion of like the tumbling compost bin in the backyard, that reminded me so much of the circular economy, which is part of all of this, and the whole cradle to grave about that, which is a better way of handling waste and production. So this motion is a great motion for this whole topic of sustainability.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Are there other questions? Riva?
Oh wait, I have another question. Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mary Beth, while you're off mute.
So are you considering doing this in-person fair when we can do it? Like maybe for Tu B'Shvat, or like hopefully it'll all be worked out by then, or if not sooner? Of course, I want you to say yes.
We really haven't talked about it, for sure next year during Earth Week. So we'll see. I think everything is so pending.
Right.
Yeah. The will is there, but the practical aspects have to be considered. We'll let Governor Pritzker decide.
Right. Our fate. Yeah.
Riva, I've unmuted you. You can ask that question.
A quick question. So we have the metal can on our counter with the lid and the filters and everything, and it's fine. And everybody who comes to my house and cooks with me or eats here knows what to do. But so many people are resistant to that. They just can't imagine putting food scraps, fruit and vegetable, not even the meat and whatever, but into this bin on their counter. They just can't imagine doing it. And I don't know if there's anyone who has any helpful hints on helping convince people that it's, give it a try.
I think that it's one of those things that you just have to live with it to really know that it's not a problem. It's just like any other new habit, One of the things that we've been saying recently, because one of our our customers did this really great shout out to us on Instagram, and she was saying that that it's like she was saying people ask her if composting is yucky, and she says climate change is yuckier. So I mean, if you can link this habit change to that, it's a really small inconvenience for the good that it's doing.
That's great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Good idea.
I want to be mindful of people's time, and I see that Michelle Oxman has her hand raised. So Michelle, why don't we take this last question, and then Jesse, you can wrap it up after that. And then if there are people who want to stay on longer and are able to stay out longer, and Mary Beth, you might be able to, we can have some open mics and ask questions. So Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, our building started using collective resource to do composting several months ago, and so far it seems to be pretty good. It's definitely not that big a deal. Being in a condo, I was never going to do the worms under the sink. That just was too much for me. But I'm glad to be able to do it as somebody who lives in a building that can't use it in a garden because we have no space for that. So, and I would like to second doing this for Tu B'Shvat if by some chance we are freed from the quarantine by then. But we don't have to wait till Earth Day next year. We could do it for the New Year of the Trees.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're so where do you live?
In Evanston, in South Evanston.
Are you in how many people in your unit, your building?
There are 14 units.
14.
I don't know how many people are actually doing it, but the couple that moved in most recently who are vegans are, they were, and he became president of the board. So it was like, oh good, there's people wanting to do this. Made it much easier to have somebody with that kind of energy to be proposing it, because the people who've lived here forever were probably less likely to. But so far it's easy.
Well, I think that once things open up a little more, I think that you'll have more opportunities to actually talk to the other people in your building about how easy it is and what goes in there. I think some people don't want to make a mistake, so they just don't do it. We're sort of in that same position with my boyfriend's building. It's like, we just have to do a little more educating.
Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, we're glad you're here.
Thank you. Oh, you're muted.
I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank all of you for coming on the call, and just to say this committee started about a year ago. I actually remember, Eli, that when we first started, I got an email from your mom saying, can kids be on the committee? Mm-hmm. So it was, so you've been part of this from the very beginning. And I just want to thank Mary Beth. This was so interesting. Great of you to come and spend this time. And Eli and JR, thank you so much. And Sharon, I just can't even begin to say how great it's been working with you and how you have really turned this project from the in-person thing and then just made this incredible online presence. And I hope everybody gets a chance to look at some of those links that you'll find in the Emet mail. Our committee, the Environment and Climate Action Committee, also is working on a few other initiatives. We are working with the building committee to make sure that Beth Emet's outdoor environment and the courtyard can become part of the National Wildlife Federation's natural habitats. We do work with advocacy primarily through the Citizens Climate Lobby. And we also are beginning to put together a film, kind of a film series of films on climate, and hopefully we can launch that this summer. But thank you, all of you, for coming to this, and thank you, everybody who participated. Thank you, Rabbi, for hosting it, and we'll see you again.
Thank you, Jesse.
all. Thank you, and thank you all.
Thanks,
Great.
Jesse.
Bye-bye.
Bye.